Okay, here we are once again. Brand new year, brand new season. Take a deep breath and welcome everyone. John Selway here for Selway's Techno Saturdays. I feel like I'm starting all over again. We had our nice break at the end of the year, had the holidays, all sorts of crazy stuff has been going on, of course. So yeah, we'll just take it easy and get going again. We'll build it back up. We'll get our momentum. We'll make things happen. And so of course this is 343 TV. We do this almost every day at the same time. Saturday is my day. And, it's Techno Saturdays, but sometimes we veer off to the side a little bit, related genres, other things. Today's going to be kind of experimental a little bit. These devices I'm looking at that are, new in Live 11, inspired by nature, are interesting. It's an interesting combination of stuff. There's some audio effects, there's some MIDI, there's some instruments, and all of them have some kind of element of physical behavior, like elements of physics, gravity, friction, things like that, right? And a lot of it has to do with sort of the modulation and how you control the parameters of the sounds in ways that are inspired by how real life objects behave and the forces of the natural world. So I think that's really interesting. So this isn't necessarily like, the title says nature inspired techno. Not exactly, because you can still come up with some totally unreal, unnatural sounds using these devices. It's really like how these things work. And it's a little tricky. So, again, this is going to be kind of an experimental show. I've got a few different sketches I've started with some of these devices. I'm still exploring them. And that's kind of the, every 4 episodes I do kind of a cycle of things. And the first one I usually do some new instrument or effect or device or synth or whatever that's new to me, that I'm exploring with and seeing what I can do creatively and, what I like or even don't like about how they work and what they sound like. So, come along with me for the ride. So we've been, a little more housekeeping before I get down to it. I should say hello to those in the chat so far. Martin Crockett, welcome. Mar, hello. And Travarsi, glad to have you here. Welcome into the 343 community. We're really reaching out and expanding our reach and doing more than ever. We have a Discord server now. If you're interested at all in what we're doing and getting involved in the community and knowing more about what we're doing, definitely, there should be links around here somewhere. Check out our Discord server, join it. There's a lot of, information to be had. You can ask questions. You can submit music for feedback. In fact, we have a community feedback session on this weekend, actually, tomorrow. So definitely drop into the Discord server and check that out if you're interested in getting some feedback on your productions. We also have a beat battle coming up. You can find out more information about this as well on the Discord server. Sponsored by Novation, and we have a pretty cool Novation controller giveaway, I believe. That you can, I guess the winner will get that. And speaking of giveaways, we usually have, every week we have something for our viewers on 343 TV. And this week we have, a regular sponsor of ours, Splice, giving away a 3-month Splice subscription. So look out for a link to enter in the chat here. And, we'll announce that by the end of the show. So, Mar asks, sort of like a pendulate synth using motion from double pendulum? Yeah, there's a little bit of that in here. There's like an XY axis kind of moving around sort of a thing. In fact, these are the devices. We're not going to look at every single one in detail. There's a lot here for just an hour. But you can see, let's look at this first one, Vector FM. This is an FM synth, and it's definitely not your typical FM synth. I mean, it does have a structure with operators and carriers, but what really makes it wild is the crazy modulation that you can do of the modulators and the carrier, like frequency, amplitude modulation, and not that it can't, you could make sounds like these in a traditional FM synth, but it would be a lot harder to do. So this one's really great for being very experimental, doing crazy sound design. It's hard to play nice and musical. It does a couple cool things. It's much better at being weird and noisy and insane, to be honest. All right, that's what I found out of it so far. We have vector grain here. A granular looper, right? So, this is letting us drag in a sample and a repeating sample and chopping it up and granularizing it and manipulating it. I've played with that just a little bit, not too much. What else have we got down here? The vector delay. This one's a little easier to approach as an audio effect. It's kind of, if you imagine like a multi-tap delay where each individual delay can move in any direction and change time and change filter and change direction, and it's pretty nuts. So it's, again, kind of a unique way of modulating delay. I've been spending a lot of time trying to get some interesting sounds out of this emit sampler. Basically, it's a granular. It says a granular synthesizer. You drop in samples, and you might have seen a show I did before where I was looking at spectral sampling. And this is kind of like combining spectral sampling and granular synthesis together, along with this like crazy sort of physics-inspired modulation. Again, a little bit tricky, but very cool and rewarding when you get deep into it. And then, is that all of them? No, we've got a couple more. Tree tone. This one's really kind of nice and ethereal, and it can sound crazy, but also it lends itself towards these pure, kind of sparkly, deep, musical, bleepy kind of textures, which are very nice. I've actually used this a little bit. And then finally, we have bouncy notes. This is a MIDI sequencer, basically. It's going to generate or react to incoming MIDI and allow you to spread out your notes and your rhythms sort of unquantize. You can quantize them, but you can let them bounce around and be affected by gravity, and you can create some really interesting, unique patterns this way. So I've used this in a couple of different ways in these sketches I have. So that's sort of what we're looking at today, and I see now that the info for entering the giveaway is in the chat. Hello, future class D&B official. What's up, Max? And Martin Crockett says, mind blown. Yes, actually, for the last couple of days, I've been diving into these devices, and I got to say, a couple of times my mind is like, what is going on here? So, all right. Where's my live? There's my live. Let's move on to some sound here and see what we have. I'm starting out chill. I've got 3 things to look at today, 3 sketches. And we're going to go, a little bit less techno to a little bit more techno as we go. This one's pretty chill. All right, let's take a look at this. We're going to blow this up real big. I like being able to zoom in on my computer here. Actually, this is a thing. Some of these Max for Live devices, they have so many parameters, and in these little Ableton Live sized devices on the screen, they can be really small. I wish somehow more of these developers would make bigger interfaces. Like, the wavetable synth in Live, you can click on that button and expand it to the size of your whole, session view, and that's amazing. That would make synths like this that are so visually oriented would be really good to have a bigger display. But, maybe it's a CPU thing, a complexity with that Max for Live programming. I don't know. So you can see what we're looking at. There's all these little individual dots that represent grains of sound. There's 16 grains total that are being modulated. And you got on the right side a few different views. This one is where we're looking at the sample. I just dropped in a sample. Honestly, I don't even remember what. I just grabbed something randomly out of my library, and it's kind of fun to do that, actually. Just sort of throw it in there and see what happens with this type of sound design. All right, so we'll reduce the number of grains. A lot less going on, right? Let's go back up. Increase the number of grains. We're going to get a more complex, dense sound. can scale the range of modulation, the speed of modulation, and the output. Right. I've also got a spectral time on here. Let's turn that off for a second and hear exactly what we're listening to. So actually a lot of that spaciness we were hearing was coming from the delay, from the time, the spectral time. All right, so that's our sample. Here we can go into some control over the grains themselves. And the size you can have in milliseconds. If I reduce the size, you start hearing shorter grains and it speeds up, becomes more continuous. If I increase the size, you're going to get larger grains. This is pretty typical of granular synthesis. It's going to space them out more, and you're going to hear longer phrases, so to speak. Where I had it before, though, is you can quantize them to note lengths or beats. And depending on your sample, you may be able to get some rhythmic patterns out of these things. I gotta say, it is tricky, though, to get all of these devices. You can do some cool rhythmic patterns with them, but it can be tricky to get precise timing. That's one thing I discovered while I was playing around with this. Okay. On the bottom here, you have some modulation destinations. So you can choose which parameters are being moved around on this XY axis. So you can see you have panning, the filter frequency. So the up and down axis is modulating the brightness and the darkness of each grain, and the left and right is panning them. You have a diagonal kind of movement that's controlling the start time, so it's moving the position of the grains around in the sample. You have volume or gain, and then size, larger or smaller. So smaller grains, you're going to hear little tinier pieces moving around. Larger grains, you're going to hear more of the original sound sort of overlapping. So that's kind of pretty. And then, so I kind of came up with this evolving, random, sort of semi-random kind of flute sample here, and then I'm spacing it out with this spectral time effect that's really nice in Ableton Live, just to make it sort of more ambient. Now, let's hear what this is going along with. Let me know if the audio levels are okay. Just drop in the chat. I adjusted my mic and the output recently. Just want to make sure it's good. What's up, Enigmatic Onion? Nice to have you back. Hello, Sabrina Asavi. Yes, these videos are archived on YouTube. You can come back and watch them anytime. And Javier Cortez, you're welcome for the knowledge drops. Hopefully you like what we're doing today. Live Society says, can't wait to see these in action. Yeah, I mean, they're interesting. So I've got this kind of chill groove going on. A little bit kind of old school IDM. It's reminding me of stuff I heard in the 90s on like early Warp artificial intelligence compilations, that kind of thing. So what's happening with the beats here is I'm using... Right, this started as a preset I played around with, but this one is, let's go and look into the pack. This is the Bouncy Notes MIDI device. Let's solo the beats. So all of those different balls are bouncing and creating variations on my beat. I've got a simple beat in here. Let's turn the bouncy notes off. So that's what I started with. Actually, I started with less. Originally, I just had one kick and one snare. Actually, let's do this. Let's get rid of the hi-hat, and it sounds a little bit less busy now. It'll be easier to hear what's going on. Actually, no snare, just the kick. So when I turn on this bouncing notes, it's going to pass through that kick, but it's also going to add notes and create variations and create new rhythms in real time. So every time I play a kick drum, it's kind of reacting and throwing out another note. And depending on the speed and the gravity and the mass, it'll bounce farther or closer or higher or lower, and I can change that. I can adjust the effect of the gravity. I have it quantized. So over here on the right side, you have a quantized amount. I'm going to turn that off. Now it's free. It's going only by a number of milliseconds, I would guess. And so you can create, if you want to create pseudo-random, out-of-time kind of things, this is really great for that. In this case, though, I don't want to be that organic. I'm going to put the quantize back on. Let's increase the speed a little bit. And lower the gravity. So you're seeing the balls kind of occasionally travel farther and faster. If I remove the gravity a lot, actually, let's just bring it down almost to zero. Now you see those balls moving really, really slowly. When the mass is light, you can see like they're lighter, they're flying up in the air more and moving around like crazy. It's sort of making it even more erratic and random. But if I increase the mass, they're bigger and heavier, right? So even though the gravity's low, they're gonna start falling down a little bit more. Let's increase the gravity. So you'll see them kind of dying away more quickly. You're gonna get less variation. All right, so this is also kind of an XY axis thing, and you have horizontal and vertical. Right now, the horizontal is set to bounce, and the vertical is set to random. So right now, it's, depending on its motion, you're going to hear it either bounce or wrap or delete. So you can actually set it to like delete a note that's playing. All right. Let's see what happens if I bounce on both. So you're going to hear more doubles. I'm slowing the speed, so you're going to have more time to hear. It'll bounce for longer. And, because it's quantized to 16th notes, and, this type of sort of style of beat I'm doing works well with these kind of rhythms. It's continuing to sound musical. It's constantly evolving, maybe a little too much, but it's filling in a lot of space. And you've seen other types of randomizing, and Live 11 has a way of randomizing whether a note plays or not, or randomizing velocity in a clip. This is kind of giving you kind of like a randomizing thing, but I like how musical it is, and you can, depending on how you adjust it, come up with something that isn't just randomly spitting out whatever, but is musically relevant to your idea, to your beat, to your melody, whatever it is. Now let's see what happens. Right now you have a number of voices, the number of simultaneous balls bouncing around. If I go down to 1, you're going to hear only one other sound playing besides the kick at a time. If I go up to 32, it could get a little crazy, depending on the settings. Another good thing we have control over is friction. So a lower friction, it will also bounce less, right? The friction every time it hits, it'll slow down a little bit more. So that's with a high friction. You can see it just dies off really quickly. With a low friction, it'll just keep bouncing all over the place. Let's go back to random. So we're going to hear less doubling and a little more variation between multiple different notes. I also have the direction randomized, so it'll go forward and backwards randomly. If I turn that off, you can see they're always starting on the left and going right. And that's also creating a more, I don't know, the rhythm is staying tighter. It's not changing it as much. Actually, it's not hardly changing it at all. I kind of like that. I can then give a little bit of percentage of randomization of direction, and it will occasionally spit out farther or go in the opposite direction. Future Class DMB Official says you could just let it randomize a super long loop and pick out the best sounding parts. That is absolutely right. So a lot of times what I'll do when I'm working with devices that generate random stuff is re-record the MIDI if it's MIDI, or resample the audio if it's an audio effect, and then go back and capture that and then go back and edit out the parts that I want to use. So in this case, in Ableton Live, insert MIDI track, MIDI from, I'm going to choose the kit that has the device on it, and it's set to post effect, so I know it's going to capture the output of that MIDI, or it should anyway. If I arm the track, you should see incoming MIDI notes following what we hear. Let's see if that works. Yep. So we're getting all of that random, semi-random, organic physics-inspired generation, MIDI generation. And then I can go back and, just find the loop that I like, or find the sections that I like. So, nice suggestion. Enigmatic Onion says, I feel like we're listening to an intensely complex randomized CV rack, but all in the box. Well, that's the thing with this stuff, is we're starting to think about making music with more than just playing a MIDI keyboard or drawing in notes. We're using complex sequencing to generate complex modulation to generate musical ideas that are, more like what people are used to doing, say, with your modular rack, that kind of thing, plugging one thing into another and seeing what happens. So that's kind of what we're exploring here. And yes, you could make bass lines with it. In fact, I have kind of a bass line / melody going on over here. This is also using bouncy notes. So let's look at my MIDI is doing. Really simple, just one note every bar, creating doing a simple progression. All right, so now let's hear that again and listen to what Bouncy Notes is doing to it. So it's doing just the same as what the drums were doing. It's adding notes to what I'm playing. I have them quantized to 16 notes again, and I played around with the speed and the gravity and the mass. Another thing I'm doing here, which is pretty cool about this, and actually you can do this on some of these other devices, is you can choose parts of this XY sort of where things are blocked. So if let's say I don't want too many high notes, I've got a block drawn in here that occasionally, depending on where the notes start, will let through the balls into the higher octaves, but mostly it's keeping them on the lower octave where I want my bass to live. So I have one down here that I drew that's keeping most of the notes that are originating on the lower octave from going to the right. And then I have one that I did horizontally that blocks notes that start high from going down too much, right? If I get rid of those, you can double click on them, and now they're going to be just all over the place all the time. And you'll hear more variation, more notes being created. Monist Impulse, I'd be interested in seeing some exploration of parameter automation on these devices for transitions. Definitely. It's complex enough already. Once you start modulating these things from external sources, you could get really deep. Maybe we'll look at some of that with the other devices that we get into on the next example. Anyway, I'm going to put these blocks back in here. And sometimes it plays a couple low notes that I felt were a little bit too low. So I'm going to just cover my lowest notes here. So that should avoid like the lowest notes, which sound a little muddy sometimes. Let's play around with this vector grain a little bit. You have these controls you'll see in a couple of the different devices. These are more complex kind of control over the physical attributes. This one has a magnet element to it, where you have a positive and negative charges basically to these particles, and they can attract each other or repel each other. There's an attractor. This square in the middle is basically, it's a magnet that can pull at the particles depending on its strength and the positive and negative charge of the particles. See, right now they're all moving towards the square. And this is controlling where the grains are and the sample, basically. So right now you'll see them, they're all kind of concentrating at this point more around the end of the sound. And yeah, that's pretty much par for the course with any kind of granular synth or sampling, is that you need to be really aware of what the sound is in the beginning, and what you put into it is what you can get out of it, so to speak. I agree about the bongos, Future Class DMB. Any randomizing MIDI to create complex drum parts is always fun, especially if you don't know how to play very well. You can, generate some rhythms really easily on a drum kit, resample that, and then mine that for the really good drum loops. Travarsi has been using Max for Live with his modular. Absolutely, use this with, bring in signals from your modular and process them with this. That'd be amazing. All right. I like this nice chill start, and this is just the beginning, getting a little deep and... Whew. I listen to that, it's taking my mind away. It's a little bit hard to focus on streaming and talking to you guys with this really chill, hypnotic music in the background. So let's come back to the main screen here and just do our little halfway through checkup. Thanks, Mar. Glad you like the bass groove. And, I can only take credit for part of it, the main progression and the sort of the root note of that chord progression. But then all of the rest of the variation is coming from this bouncy notes. So yeah, this is really a lot of fun to play with. And let's see what else we can do with it. Anyway, of course, 343 TV, we're here every Saturday. Welcome to everyone who's here for the first time. Welcome back for all of you who've been following along. A little reminder here that 343 Labs is a music production school. We have classes online, and we have physical classes in Berlin and in New York City. We've been doing these streams, live almost every day since, the pandemic started. We wanted to just keep sharing what we do and expanding our reach and growing our community and letting you know what we're all about. And I've really enjoyed this time, doing these streams. It's been great. I was doing Techno Tuesdays, now I'm doing Selway Techno Saturday, and it's a highlight of my week to come on and talk to you guys and play around with music and just hang out a little bit and learn. So yeah, thanks to all of you for that. If you haven't already joined the giveaway, there's a link up here in the chat somewhere for the Splice giveaway that we're doing that we'll announce by the end. I'll also remind you guys about our new Discord server. We're working really hard on growing a community around, getting our community involved in the Discord server. There's a lot of events and activities and opportunities to share your music. There's some contests. We have a beat battle sponsored by Novation. We have a community feedback session tomorrow. And yeah, just come and check us out. You don't have to be a student at 343. You know, this grows beyond just our classes, but you can find out more information about our classes here. Feel free to ask a question in the chat. 343 Labs is here to answer. You can check out our website. Of course, we've got links down here. And if you haven't already, subscribe to 343. Give us a like if you like us. And, just be responsive and join in the conversation. That's what I like about these, is that you guys are asking questions and making comments, and I am happy to be on here and just, make music, teach, share, and have fun. So let's see. Future Class DMB says, great teachers, I've been learning. We appreciate that. Thank you very much. And Mar, I programmed it, but it does things that I wouldn't be able to do if I was just drawing in, or wouldn't be able to do very easily if I was just drawing in or playing MIDI. So you can come up with some really, even if you have musical training and you know about music theory and you've got great rhythm and you can compose and arrange and go crazy, these tools are still really valuable for doing things you might not have thought of, or breaking out of, or doing a different style, or just being experimental and discovering new things and new ideas. All right. So while I'm blabbing at you, I'm going to load up another sketch that I have here. Still sort of on the chill side, but a little more up-tempo, a little more driving. Not banging techno. I have to say, like, all of these devices I've been playing around with, I was trying to do some more aggressive stuff, and I definitely kept veering back towards chill, spacey, hypnotic. Something about the way these devices work and the character they have and the flavor they have lends themselves towards atmospheric and, a little bit weird, a little bit strange grooves. I like that about them, actually. They're not necessarily going to give you that, like, tight, precise power that you need for, like, big room techno, for example. Not that you couldn't, and I'm still exploring that. And there are some aggressive sounds you can get out of a couple of these devices. And of course, also with the granular sampling kind of stuff, it depends on what you put into it. But the hardcore jungle, please. I am by no means a drum and bass or jungle expert. I've dabbled, but you should probably get your drum and bass and jungle tutorials from someone who really knows, to be honest. So, and I'd like to think that kind of even though I'm a techno guy, like the general sort of overview of these instruments can apply to a lot of different styles, no matter what you're into. So, we got a stream question. What camera are you using to stream look sharp? I'm using an inexpensive, no longer made Canon camcorder. I paid like $250 for it. I forget the model number. You have to ask me again. But yeah, it's like 1080p, 60 FPS, decent lens. I have the lights really make the biggest difference. I mean, watch this. It's all about the lights, let me tell you. And all right, let's get back to live. I have another sketch loaded up, and let's see where we're at. So, like I said, a little more energy on this one, but still deep, still atmospheric, because that's where these sounds wanted to take me. I started with the beats here. I mean, that helps. If you want to make something energetic and you're doing techno or dance floor stuff, you start with the energy level and the beats, and then the rest of it will follow, right? And Praveen, yes, these are the new devices. I believe, Dylan Baston, right? Just grab them from the live beta page this week. I've been playing around with it took me forever. I know this isn't a new thing, but I finally got Punchbox for kick drum design. And this is actually just a preset. It was like right away. I'm like, I like that kick. I'm just going to use it. So that's a fun plugin. And then it was nice. I got Drumazon as part of the deal. I've got a real 909 here, but this one's pretty close. So this is nice to add a little old school flavor to this beat. And then just throwing on some shakers and hi-hats and stuff like that. Oops. All right. Now, in this one, we're going to look at emits. I might come back to this one though. Emit can be tricky to get it doing what you want, I'll be honest. But I got this kind of dubby, atmospheric chord stab thing going on, which I quite like. I'm really into sounds like these. And it has a different character. Like normally you get like, you make your chord stab and you put your filter on and you put your delays on it. Okay, there's delays on this, but you know, the character of this kind of granular synthesis is definitely giving it a little extra something, a little extra complexity and a new kind of tone to it, which I appreciate. But before we dive into that, let's look at what I've got going on the tree tone sound. So let's see what this sounds like. Right now, it's not making any sound because I've got the noise down and the rain down. And this is a resonator type of effect, and it's kind of like a physical modeling instrument. If you're familiar with physical modeling synthesis, usually there's something that starts a vibration and then something that vibrates or something that resonates. And that's what's happening here. So we have noise, and it's running through a filter, a complex resonating filter bank that has this kind of algorithm that generates, it has these organic tree-like patterns that determine what frequencies you hear. And it can be, you know, it's modulating a little bit. You can see it's moving. There's wind, and the wind and the amount and speed of the wind changes how this tree kind of moves around. And we can change the center frequency of the filter and the bandwidth of the filter to get different tonal balance. And you can hear there's a swelling up and down. So over here on the right side, there's a modulation section, and I'm using an LFO, and that's routed to the gain and to the noise amount. So that's what's creating that wave. There's a couple other destinations here. You can see there's the filters moving around a little bit, and then this thing called Algo Mix, which I'll come back to in a second. All right, so that's the noise. And then underneath there, you have rain. So this is kind of like random spikes at different frequencies, and it creates kind of a percussive effect. It's really pretty. And you can see different branches moving depending on where the drops are hitting. It's pretty cool. So, you know, already you can hear this is like a really beautiful ambient instrument or drone. There's no MIDI going into this right now. You can, though. You can play MIDI into it. Over here in the modulation section under routing, you have key to mallet. So that'll give MIDI note presses to trigger what the raindrops are doing. So, you know, right now, the raindrops are like random mallet hits. If you imagine like a stick hitting a xylophone. So I'm going to turn the rain down, and I have just 16th notes playing a pattern. All right, let's turn the spectral time off there for a second. And I also have this is just a regular old Ableton Live random MIDI effect. When you play one note, you're going to hear one sort of tone of the mallet. But if you play higher or lower notes, you're going to hear different tones. So I'm randomizing the tone. You're going to hear brighter and darker notes, right? And that way I'm able to create, you know, non-random rhythms. And you can combine that with a noise. I'm going to reduce that LFO modulation of the gain so it doesn't go away completely. All right. And then if you want, you could also mix in some random raindrops occasionally. So occasionally it sounds like it's flamming or... Right. So let's look at the resonator itself. We've seen how you control it, right? How you modulate it. And when because the noise and the raindrops are on, when I hit stop, it keeps making sound. So let's turn the noise off and the rain off so we get some quiet here. Now, there's the resonator is tunable. Right now it's scaled. Normally the scale is off and you're just hearing different frequencies across the spectrum. And you're going to get more inharmonic, sort of detuned sounding things. You can choose how those sounds are spread out. So the spread is going to make some of them higher, some of them lower. We have a decay, like how long the resonator keeps ringing after you hit it. I've got it pretty short because I wanted a percussive sort of drum-like effect. Now this is really great if you're making kind of like weird, dark, hypnotic techno, and a lot of hypnotic, dark techno kind of has these weird, out of tune textures and drones. So this would be great for that. But I wanted to do something a little bit harmonic, so you can sort of quantize all those different frequencies to specific notes. So I've got scale on, and you can choose just chromatic, or you could do major, minor, major pentatonic, minor pentatonic. Let's hear what that sounds like in major pentatonic. You can choose what your tonic or your root note is, depending on what key you're in. And I sort of figured out what key I wanted to be in was D sharp, based on that chord stab sample I was playing with. And then you can shift those up and down the scale and kind of lean higher or lower. I just had an idea. I wonder, can I modulate that shift? I've got a destination B on the LFO. There it is. So now the LFO is sweeping up and down, and it's shifting higher or lower and changing the notes that we're hearing. Let's slow that LFO down a little bit. Praveen asks, is tree tone like synplant? In a way, actually, that's a good thing to show you guys. A lot of people don't know about synplant. It is a really interesting plugin, and it has a similar sort of tree-based, fractally organic interface you'll see here. This is a complex FM synthesizer, actually. And you can see there's that tree thing. Each branch can have a different variation of the sound, and right, depending on which note you play, you're going to get a different modulation or variation on the sound. Maybe I should do this as a future episode, because it's a really cool plugin that I've used before, and it does have a similar kind of XY axis organic algorithm kind of modulation over the sounds. So yeah, good question. And all right, there's more to look at in here. Let's also look at the different algorithms I'm using. I don't know that they have names. Let's see. These are just the different ways that these trees grow, let's say. And you can actually kind of re-trigger them in real time and see them growing into their new shape. And that's something you could automate, actually. Let's see what happens. Yeah, you can see the algorithm is changing and regrowing every time that modulation envelope changes in the clip. That's really pretty. Yeah, because I'm retriggering the algorithm, we're going to get a progression in the harmony. All right. This is really getting out into the outer space, isn't it? Like I said, that's what this stuff does. It's just good for that. All right. So, and, the last thing I did here was I used bouncy notes to do. I was like, what would it sound like on a 303? So I came up with this kind of bouncy, sort of a little bit funky sounding bass line using this ABL3 bass line synth. So, if you're inclined to more experimental kind of stuff and you like acid, you could do some really crazy tweaky 303 out of time bouncy kind of patterns with this thing. I think that would be I'm going to explore this more to see what else I can get out of it. All right. So I'm going to go to one final sketch that I have, and this one is a little bit less fleshed out, and I was trying to get something more aggressive sounding basically. So let's load that up. Do I want to save that? I'm going to save it. Why not? Mar is asking if this is available for Live 10. I don't believe so. I think these are included in Live 11. I don't know that they're backwards compatible. Don't quote me on that, but we'll have to investigate. All right, let's hear what I have for something a little bit heavier. Not super hard, I haven't used any distortion or like heavy compression to make this sound more brutal, but it does have a dark, still on the hypnotic side though, isn't it? I've got this droning sound, right? And so this is what Emit is doing. And let's take a look at this, right? So, it's a granular synthesizer. Granular synthesizers are usually samplers, sample-based, not always. So I've, dropped in a sample in here. And, I started with a bright, thick, heavy sound, and that's giving me a brighter, thicker, heavier output rather than these pretty little, whatever, like dainty sounds we've been hearing so far. So what you're seeing here is kind of a spectrum, a spectral kind of overview of the frequencies in the sample. That's at 100% length, right? So you're able to, in real-time time stretch, you can modulate this. This is actually stretching. If I reduce the percentage, it's going to stretch out the length of that sample. And you can see there's this little blue dot, which is basically a grain. That's every time I'm controlling this from MIDI, and each time there's a note, it's starting at the spot where this orange square is, and then it's moving in a direction that I've chosen. Right, and similar to the way the MIDI bouncing thing was working, where we can control like how it bounces and whether it's affected by gravity or not. Here we have force, which is how fast the force with which it is emitted. Right, this grain starts and moves, and then friction is how much resistance it meets as it moves. So like right now, if I do a higher force, you're going to see it move faster through the sample. And you can also see that it's bouncing. So when it hits the edge of the window, it's bouncing back. I can also make it wrap. So it's just going to keep going in the same direction and go back to the beginning. Let's go back to bounce. So it's just bouncing around that square. And depending on the length, you're going to get more or less variation in that sound. You can hear that it's kind of a bass pluck that fades away. So as that grain gets closer to the end where there's less going on, it gets quieter, darker, right? If I go more towards the beginning of the sound, it's a lot brighter because it's staying at the onset where the most is happening. All right, and then there's the friction, is the resistance it meets. If I reduce the friction to 0, it's going to never slow down and move just all the time, same rate. If I make the friction all the way up, it stops it. So you're going to hear a little bit of movement and then it stops. This sound needs a compressor on it. It's all, the levels are all over the place. That sounds crazy. A little loud now. All right. So you can hear some potential here. This is just one sample and one example of, you know, this interesting kind of physics-based modulation of a granular synthesizer. And then the spectral part of it is, you know, you're able to like choose where in the sample, what part of the frequency range of that sample you're hearing, and there's a filter. So, you know, the grain has a filter, and you can kind of choose how narrow or wide that is, and have the resonance. You're going to hear, as that grain moves around, it's going to change what the filter frequency is. Avon Stade asked, is there any bass or is it just the kick? Yeah, I just picked an easy kick drum that has like that rolling rumble in it. I didn't do any sound design on the kick. I just like, oh, that sounds good, and dropped it in there. And all right, the other thing that's happening here is I'm not actually sending MIDI to this. So if you go back to emit, MIDI is off, and I have it set to one burst. So that's one time for it to emit. And there's a rate of 1B, which is 1 bar. I could make it go faster if I want. Let's go. And you can hear it's going every quarter note. And then the lifetime is how long it can last after. Let's make that shorter. You hear that it doesn't really vary after a quarter note, it just restarts. Now, another thing I want to point out here, I don't know if this is a beta thing, still in development thing, not quite ready thing, but there's a delay with this synth. Like especially when you're controlling it with MIDI, no matter what I have in terms of plugins or buffer settings, I never was able to get it to quantize perfectly. So like you'll hit a note and then it'll happen a little bit later. Actually, let's demonstrate that. And I'm hoping that this is something that either I'm doing it wrong or they need to fix it. But basically, all right, I'm going to turn MIDI on. All right. And you can, when MIDI note pitch is on, you can play it like a regular keyboard. I'm going to turn that off, so it's just going to play the original pitch of the sample. Let's hear what it sounds like. You can hear that the note is perfectly quantized, but it's happening late. So maybe it's just, you know, this is a very CPU intensive thing. Maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe something with the plug-in delay compensation needs to be adjusted. I'm actually using the track delay to make it tighter. So anyway, that was just a little caveat there that it's really hard to get this thing to be really tight in terms of timing, and maybe that's something that will get worked on. So we're almost out of time. This just flew by today. You can see how these instruments, like you get into them and the time just kind of, you're just in another dimension, another place, another space, another time. So CHDB Music says we went from yoga class to Nitzer Ebb. That's fine. I'm fine with that. I'll wake up in the morning, I'll stretch, I'll do some yoga, and then warm up, and then bang it out. Why not? So, I'm glad you guys find this interesting. Thanks, Vladislav. I'm seeing a lot of new names in the chat today. This is great. Have we got the winner for the giveaway yet? I'm going to play around with the sound a little bit for a few more minutes. I'm going to see if I get this a little bit tighter. Let's go back to... You know, I liked it when it was just doing every bar. know what? I haven't really gone over what the directional stuff does yet. All right, so in this emitter, we've got angle, polar settings, and a width. So let's just put these back to defaults. You can see it's just going straight horizontal, and it's only staying in one sort of layer of the spectrum. Although there is still some modulation going on as it goes higher or lower. If I make this box, this emitter, narrower, we're going to hear much less variation. It's going to be more precise. And if I go, that's going to be more variation high and low with that vertical shape. And if I go wider, you're going to hear more variation over time. And then I can change with the angle what direction it's going and whether it's going to bounce off a different wall. I can increase the width, so we're going to emit in more different directions at the same time. And then we can go positive and negative. We can go both, like, two directions at once. With one grain, it's going to either go one way or the other way, but I can increase the grains. This is going to get nuts. Oh, I need to increase the burst. Now we got multiple grains bouncing around. And it starts to get really nuts. It's multiple bursts, multiple grains. It's really great for these kind of complex, evolving drones. It'd be really good. This is going to be really great for sound design and generating waveforms to resample. You could even put them in your wavetable synth. There's so much possibility here. We're just scratching the surface. So I think we're just about done here. Thanks for being here on our, my first show of the new season for the beginning of 2021. Congratulations to our giveaway winner, Scott Strigas. Hopefully one of those is right. We'll get in touch with you. You're the lucky winner of the 3 months of Splice. Make good use of that. And if you're not sure what to do with it, come join our Discord server and ask questions. We're all around. The instructors are around. Your peers and fellow music producers and students are around. And there's a lot of good stuff going on. So one last plug for joining our Discord. We do have the feedback session tomorrow. And we have an upcoming beat battle, which you can show your skills and enter, and for a chance to win a controller from Novation. And that's it for today. Thanks so much. Give us a like, subscribe. Check out 343 Labs for information on our classes, and I will see you again next week. Adios, everyone.